I'm Owen Wild, and I'm part of the industry marketing team here at NCR Banking. And again, just to remind you, these NCR Connect podcasts are where we come together and address the key issues and trends that are affecting financial institutions around the globe. If you've missed the introduction to the series, please check out episode 1, where you'll hear me give an overall scope and mission of the podcast. And while you're at it, take a listen to episode 2, and now here comes episode 3. So we're really excited that this is kicking off in a consistent sequence of content. And over the course of the series, there will be a full range of topics that we're going to cover. And as I've said on all of the episodes, we want your input and feedback as to the topics and or comments on our content. So we've set up a very easy way for you to get in touch with us. Email us at connect@ncr.com. That's connect, CONNECT, @ncr.com. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about the evolution of industry standards. We're going to talk about which ones are critical to self-service banking and why they are important, and overall why these industry standards are important to evolution and innovation for banking technology. So joining me today, I'm joined by my colleague, Robert Johnston, and just by means of a brief introduction, Robert is a veteran in the ATM industry. He served in a variety of marketing and sales roles over his career, and Robert is one of our software product marketing leads on our team here with us on the banking marketing side at NCR. And the area he's focused on, one of the areas he's focused on amongst many, is the overall evolution of our next generation architecture and how we're going to be continuing to deliver solutions that deliver the digital first ATM experience for both financial institutions and customers are demanding. So Robert, thanks for taking the time and joining us today.
Well, thanks, Owen. Great to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks. So let's just start by providing the listeners with some context. Can you just provide an overall state of the environment and on industry standards and how we got here, who comes up with them, and what are they designed what are really they designed to accomplish?
Well, I think industry standards are always interesting to look at, because as an industry matures in the way that the ATM industry has, then it tends to gather a whole load of standards around it. And the standards we have in the ATM industry today govern a number of distinct areas. So there's a lot of them. There's a big list you could draw out, but you can actually group them into logical patterns. So, for example, there's some standards around just general usability and accessibility for consumers. So things like in the US, you've got the ADA standards, which provides people of all different shapes, sizes, and abilities a guarantee that they can access the screen, they can control the machine adequately. So there's those usability type ones. Then there's security standards. So they're quite comprehensive, and they cover both physical security in some respects, but also things like safe design and the physical box that the ATM's in. And you've got other ones which are designed around logical security. They cover the software and the software environment that's on the ATM. And then you've got other things which go into much more detail. They drill down into actual messaging formats and things which are used to process and transmit the transaction instructions that are coming to and from the ATM. So there's a whole range of standards, all affecting different areas of operation. But they're all quite important, because what they seek to do is either safeguard the public and the banks from attack of all sorts. And the other thing they do is they attempt to make it more efficient to run the whole system, to make the ATM easier to run. So that's where the things like the transaction message standards things come into play. It's a combination of security and ease of interoperability between different vendors and different banks. So that in a nutshell is what we have.
Yeah, and all of us involved in the marketing and in informing our product teams as a global entity, we have there's just so many that we have to keep an eye at, both at the Some of them are global, like the ones we're going to talk about today, and some of the messaging standards. A lot of them are regional, if not local, and being able to have that input to capture all these is a big part of what we try to do when we're informing the organization, so that we can bring out products and that are compliant within the market. So but there's some that actually have, a little bit more of a high priority in terms of how we're looking at our product development, Robert. So take a couple minutes to kind of talk about the ones that are really kind of driving a lot of the software development and how we're building our applications.
Yeah, I think that there's in the software side of things and how we're building applications, there's quite a few standards around the card security and the security things, which are well established in the industry. Things like EMV, PCI DSS, these kind of things are fairly well established. They're your kind of ticket to the game. What's now emerging though is as banks are evolving to much more digital structures in terms of their technology. There's a need for ATMs to kind of join that digital party, and that requires the ATM to operate in a slightly different way. So some of our old standards in terms of transaction protocols and messaging formats are changing. And as the rest of the banking industry and certainly the payments industry is adopting ISO 20022, it seems almost across the board internationally, it makes sense for the ATM to kind of follow that direction as well. So ISO 20022 is one of the standards in scope. It might not necessarily be a standard we would implement right down deep in the ATM, but certainly once an ATM has issued a transaction instruction, we really want to be in a position where we can provide that to the surrounding network in ISO 20022 format. So there's various
Mm.
methods of achieving that, but ISO 20022 is really emerging as the dominant standard in payments processing, and so we need to be able to address that from an ATM perspective.
So basically, Robert, so with this being elevated to an ISO standard level, it's obviously going to be a global protocol that I think what you're saying here, just to summarize, is really tying with this standard. We're now able to bring the ATMs into an overall ecosystem of the financial payments environment. Is that a safe assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, it opens the door to that. Now ISO 20022 is a kind of general standard which dictates how data is handled along with transaction instructions and things. So you can carry a good set of data with each transaction message, and it allows you to do a much more complex set of processing in the background and open up lots of new services. The challenge with that and with any kind of open standard like that is that there's different ways to interpret it. So one of the things that's happening in many countries is to put some more control over how to interpret ISO 20022. So we see in some European countries, for example, as open banking standards have been developed, the central banks or the central banking authorities have put in place certain message structures they prefer. And one of the standards groups that we work with is Nexo Standards, who are European based, but again, they're looking at global influence.
Mm-hmm.
And they've dictated a standard by which you should construct your ISO 20022 messages for ATMs. They've also looked at retail POS systems and things, and they're very active and a very positive movement in terms of getting everybody focused on a really tight interpretation of the standard so that it's much easier for everyone's systems to interoperate then. And it leads to faster, what we've seen anyway in many markets is these kind of standards coming to the fore have helped accelerate the adoption of new technology because everyone's working off the same hymn sheet, as it were,
Mm-hmm.
and it means that they can join systems together much more quickly, much more easily than would otherwise be the case if everyone was interpreting things slightly differently.
Yeah, I think you started to touch on a little bit here. So, I mean, fundamentally, you got to make a business decision. Both we do it at NCR's level, and then our customers do it. So, let's just take it from the inside out. So, we've been developing, products and services for financial institutions for a very, very long time. Why did we feel that it was important to focus activities and align to these standards? What are we hoping to accomplish from that perspective?
Well, I think it's that interoperability thing. I think in the original days of the ATM, the fact you could go and get cash while the bank was shut was a fantastic value proposition. Nowadays, the use of cash has changed. It's not going away, it's just changed. And customers are very keen to be able to do more than just get cash when the bank is shut. They want to do other services as well. And in order to field those other services, you have to go beyond the normal sort of ATM rails, as it were. You have to be able to connect to other parts of the bank, or even to third-party services facilities by the bank. And for that, you need a different set of protocols, a different set of configuration
Hmm.
options. And that's really where these other standards come in, because the protocols we use for just dispensing cash are designed just for dispensing cash, and they don't have
Mm.
the flexibility or breadth to communicate with the rest of the institution. So the ATM traditionally was in its own little silo, which was fine 15 years ago,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
today it needs to be integrated into the digital environment that surrounds it.
So by us adopting and aligning our interface to this standard, we're now able to, I guess, just oversimplify, to play well with others that are aligned in that same architecture or
Yeah,
same protocol.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly it. It gives the opportunity for an ATM deployer, if they want to provide a full range of banking services at the ATM, and the ATM then becomes an entry point into the full banking environment, as opposed to just being a cash point. Now, some customers are quite happy just to run along with having it just as a cash point, but more and more banks we're seeing now are demanding that there's more connectivity, there's more opportunity to provide more services.
A lot of times we go to industry events and we hear presentations on innovation, a lot of that is future items. But in this case, the work that has been done and our strategy alignment to ISO 2022 is actually something that's here and now. Can you talk a little bit about our portfolio and how how it's already being made available to our customers with products and solutions?
Yeah, our ATM enterprise software portfolio, the major ATM applications that we offer, they're all capable of dealing with ISO 20022 in various ways. So, whichever of these applications a customer adopts, they can be confident that they can then connect out to the wider services. There are different ways of doing it as well. We give some choice to the customer. So, in one area, our application can support native ISO 20022 on the ATM itself. And so for a greenfield site, that's a potential option to go with. For
Hmm.
established networks where they're typically using a protocol like NCR's NDC protocol to run the ATM and do the cash business on the ATM, we can put in place a terminal handler which will in real time convert the NDC messages into ISO 20022 and back again. Two-way traffic is required, so
Yeah.
we can convert it both ways in real time. And that allows you then to connect to the broader network. And we're also able to do things like, having that flexibility allows us to do things like connecting directly to core banking systems.
Mm.
So instead of being restricted to one or two accounts being visible to a consumer at the ATM, and that's all you can deal with in self-service, you can open up a service where you can see all of your accounts. If you've got a
Yeah.
loan account or a mortgage, you can see them all at the ATM and deal with them in a similar way as you would on your telephone banking, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then also ISO 20022 opens the route into open banking, which is developing very rapidly in many parts of the world. And it means that you could, for example, be at the ATM and you could look at an insurance product which is actually run by a third party, but the
Yeah.
bank can connect you to that and things through open banking standards, which again generally tend to um, encourage, if not dictate, that the customers or that the bank should be using ISO 20022 to navigate through those systems.
Yeah, I think it's, there are many things that we spend our time on, but when you see something like this that really can bring unprecedented opportunities to provide consumers with so much um, convenience and the capabilities, which more and more they're going to want to have a single point of contact for anything they're using. To have to use one channel for vendor A, one channel for product B is just something that's going to become, you know, not feasible over the long term. But also to be able to provide this in a way that allows our financial institution customers to more easily integrate and bring things into their ecosystem to add a different value proposition. I think it opens up a lot of potential excitement for new opportunities and differentiation to the customer base. So that's all the good things. So like if I'm a bank and I want to ignore this, I don't want to play in this environment, what's the downside? What's my risk?
That's an interesting question. There's the risk is that you potentially become less competitive in the market. You can still dispense cash just as well as everybody else. You can probably accept deposits for cash just as well as anybody else. But well, actually, I say just as well as anyone else. But then when you think about it, maybe you can't because you're not giving access to as many different accounts as the customer might want to look at. Also, then you're restricted to just doing cash. There's very little else you'll be able to do through the ATM channel. And some banks, as I mentioned, there are some banks who just want to focus their ATM channel on cash only, and that's a business decision they've made. But for the majority, what they're looking at is migrating customer traffic away from the branch counter where the transactions are quite expensive to operate and getting more and more of it into self-service. And to encourage that move to self-service, if you can make the self-service experience at the ATM as close as possible to the range of services that are available on the mobile device, then that's going to help enormously. It's never going to be identical to the mobile phone. Obviously, the user interface is fundamentally different in terms of how it behaves. There's a different format. But if you can offer this a similar range of services, if not more, then that is going to remove any barriers or help remove any barriers to adoption. And it's also going to help people who maybe aren't comfortable with a mobile phone and mobile banking. They'll feel a bit more secure at the ATM because the ATM is attached to the bank's network. It's not.
They've got more familiar, and they may have more familiarity using an ATM than they would with a mobile on certain demographic and age differential environments.
And then moving away from the ATM side of things, it's just the behind the scenes, just the sheer interoperability and connectivity that is growing up around everyone starting to adopt the same standards. That really is a huge boost to operational efficiency within the bank. You can develop things faster, you can develop things more simply. If you're looking for staff to build things and maintain things, they're easily obtainable because it's a standard skill set across the industry now. There's no kind of specialist weird protocol knowledge that's required anywhere. So that really is a big driver, as well as just the sheer operational efficiency, speed to market, and agility of the whole environment that this creates.
No, Robert, this is a really good overview, and like a lot of things as we're working at, it's not just one thing that's going to execute a branch transformation strategy or be able to help a financial institution differentiate, but having these foundations and being able to start doing technology integrations that can be done at scale and at an efficient cost is definitely giving the opening up a lot of potential opportunities for customers that we're working with around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we've talked a lot there about ISO 20022, but of course, we shouldn't ignore the fact there's other standards we spoke about at the beginning in terms of security, usability, and all these kind of things. Most of those ones, the more sort of mature standards, are actually legal requirements to varying degrees in varying countries. So the downside of not adopting those is you simply wouldn't be able to do business with the ATM fleet. But in other cases, certainly with security standards, things like what security standard do you want to have on the safe or the ATM, the physical safe? Again, there's a number of choices there, and it's usually open to deployers to take a risk assessment, right? What physical standard that we think is right for a given site. So there's still an element of risk assessment when it comes to choosing which standards to adopt, but there are some, as I say, which are legislated, you have no choice, and other ones where you look at the business case, you look at the way the industry is evolving, and you think, yeah, we've got to do that. Even if it's not compulsory to do ISO 20022, for example, it looks like we need to have a way to work in that environment as we go forward. So what we've done with our product line, again, you asked kind of earlier on, is really to give some choices there. So if a customer wants to continue to work in legacy protocols, we can support that. If they want to make the move into the new digital protocols, we can support that as well, and various stops in between. So we're trying to accommodate that on a global level with different standards, different countries and things, which is always the challenge of for our engineers, and keeps us all busy. So yeah, so you can see there the consequences for customers.
No, this is really great, really exciting pieces. And Robert, I just need you to make a promise you're going to come back on the Connect podcast, and we'll go into more detail on the specific outcomes and benefits that some of these solutions can bring. And we'll maybe also bring on some of our customers that are working this in, and we can talk to them about how it's impacted and changed the way they've been able to execute their strategy. So that would be,
that'd be
like,
great.
get your promise to come back. That would be great.
Yep, that'd be great. I look forward to that. Yep.
Sounds good. Thanks for taking the time and joining me today, Robert. And for those of you listening, thank you for taking a couple minutes out of your day to spend time with us on the Connect podcast. Like I said earlier, if you have questions for Robert or about anything we're doing here within NCR, about this podcast, or about topics you'd like to see covered or hear covered, at least on a podcast. Can't commit to seeing us yet, but at least listening to us. Please reach out to us at connect@ncr.com, and we will certainly start a dialogue through that channel. That will wrap up our podcast for today. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Take care.